What is up, players? It's Warboss Tay up in this mug. If you're a Dark Eldar or Drukhari player, or you just want to learn how to paint some bright, crazy red hair, then stay tuned, pick up your paintbrush, grab something to work on, and I'm going to take you through step by step every single paint stroke and even fix the mistakes that I make so you can see how you can do it if you happen to run into the same issues in painting Drukhari or Dark Eldar hair. Now I'm going to start with a white undercoat because that's what I prime my model in, gray sear. And I'm going to start with Miston Red. It has great coverage, and even though I'm using this Supreme Gladiatress Maevia figure, which has these silver hooks and extra added detail, it's got such a huge profile. The body of this hair is so big. I want to show you every single technique that I use to approach it, and you can replicate it for just your regular Dark Eldar witch hair. Even if it's something very small like the head with the ponytails, you can use this technique, everything I teach you. So the first thing you're going to want to do is get this Miston Red over the entire surface of all of the hair. And even Games Workshop's witch sculpts, their heads for their witches, which they released in 2010, they have the great detail and the individual strands all sculpted and modeled on, so you can really go to work with it once we get to the washes and the highlights. But if you really want quality, I mean, this Supreme Gladiatress Maevia figure is so much fun to paint, and I'm having to use it with this Games Workshop handle just to get at all of the angles. I suggest working with a handle or like a piece of cork I use sometimes with some blue tack on it. You want to be able to easily turn your model into different directions so that you can reach those hard to see places, hard to access areas, and that's what I'm doing. You also want to make sure you're using a brush that's suitable for the job. Even though this is a base coat and you could go in with a very big brush, you don't want to go too large because you don't want that paint to be sitting there all gloopy and thick, and when it dries it's going to ruin all of the detail. So you want to see all of those strands, all of that sculpting goodness. I use a brush that is not quite a detail brush. It's still, I think, a standard base coat brush, but it does have the ability for me to get in there and make a finer point so that I can really reach all of the areas that I need to. Like I said, Miston Red is a terrific color. It's a little bit brighter than Corn Red. Corn Red is an option if you don't have Miston Red. You're just going to be adding on a couple extra layers so that you could build up that color. But if you do want your Dark Eldar Drukhari to have red hair that's a little bit darker and not quite as bright, then Corn Red is your second choice for going with the starting color. Just know that once you add the washes, which is Agrax Earthshade, it's going to tone down a lot of that. And then when you're bringing it back up with the highlights, we're never going to quite get to this a really bright, vibrant red for the entire body of hair. We're going to see it in the highlights, but we're balancing those highlights out with the depth of the shade. Okay, then getting in close here, we're going to be working to pull the color towards the scalp. So this is the first technique I want to share with you all. When you're working with painting any kind of hair, start at the tip, start at the end, don't start at the scalp and push the paint color out, because you're going to have too much paint on your brush. Unless you really thin it down and you don't mind going back and forth to your palette, keep the paint color at the tip of the hair and work your way, pull that color up so that you can keep that color from getting onto your face. It's not so bad if you haven't painted your faces or your heads, but as you can see, I've already painted the skin tones of this Supreme Gladiatress Maevia, so I don't want that red color to get onto her hair, or her face. So I'm starting at the headpiece there, and I'm just pulling the hair down to the hairline. Getting in a little bit closer to show you what I'm doing. Start further out and pull the color towards the hairline. Another thing you could do is just dab the color across, like you saw me do just there. Again, you want for this part, you do want a brush with a smaller head, smaller surface area. Spread out that paint and hit all those angles. And I think I'm trying to get rid of the paint on my paintbrush so I don't have too much. And then it looks like what I'm doing here is putting the color down at the hairline and then pushing it up. But you saw that I did get rid of it further up on the main body of the hair. So I'm just making sure that there's not a lot of paint on my paintbrush. That's what you really want to avoid. The excess of the paint on the paintbrush that's going to end up all right at the hairline. Okay, so now I just gotta make sure that I hit all the angles. Again, having a handle is very helpful for this. The worst thing is finishing your paint job, stepping back, looking at it, and seeing that you missed an entire angle and it's all just primer. So having a handle will definitely help with that. You also want to make sure you're using suitable light that can really light up the entire model that you're working on. Okay, now I'm just pulling the paint down the strands. You want to go with the direction of the hair. Working perpendicular and painting everything horizontally is going to cause a lot of paint buildup, which you don't want. So you can see I painted the silver hooks in the interim. Since that's not a part of this tutorial, I just kind of did that off camera. And then we're going to get into, now that the paint has dried, you want to let your paint dry overnight. Worst thing you can do is paint on shades like Agrax Earthshade when the base coat is still wet. That is the worst thing because it's just going to mix with the Miston Red and then it's going to gum up the details even more. So Agrax Earthshade, terrific paint color. I think if you're a new painter, one tool you always want in your arsenal is a pot of Agrax Earthshade and Nuln Oil. Agrax Earthshade has a dark brown undertone to it. So when you're painting it on, it creates a nice shade, an earthy shade, if you will, which goes great on a red base coat. If I went with Nuln Oil, I would have dulled down that red color even more, and then it would have been harder to build that back up to the color of red that I want. This allows you to retain some of the properties of that red Miston Red paint. What you don't want to do, however, is slap it on really thick. Now I know especially if you're a new painter and you're working with shades for the first time, it's going to amaze you how easy just adding the shade on is at creating instant shadows, instant shading. It gets in between all of the strands of hair. It makes it look really nice right off the bat. And so sometimes we go with the more is more approach, and we don't want to do that. We want to put just enough shade so that it gets into each of the recesses without actually pooling, making puddles, and obscuring the detail between the hair. And again, this is a resin figure from RTLW Miniatures. I've got that link down below in the description if you'd like to pick her up for yourself. It's an affiliate link, so you'll be helping out my studio if you do check it out. But you can also use this on any of the Games Workshop plastic witch figures, Cabalite figures. I think the Archon too has a little ponytail. Anything in plastic you can do. This is all resin. RTLW Miniatures is a boutique company that manufactures and designs all of these resin figures. I just find them so much easier to work with than other resin products I've worked with. And now working on the hair closest to the face, you can see that I dabbed a little bit on her hairline so that it creates a line between the hair and the scalp or her forehead. You don't want to go too much though, you just want to put in a little bit so that it'll create that line. And now you can see I'm pulling the paint up with every paint, not just the base colors, but as you can see the shade here too. You work with the strand, the direction of the hair, pull the paint up in the direction of the hair. Now we're going to go on to Miston Red. We've allowed the paint to dry over a couple days now. I had some other projects I was working on, but I'm going to get back to it with the Miston Red. Now, the big fear of many painters is that when you start working on a model that has been shaded, that you are going to mess up that shading. And that fear is sometimes paralyzing because it makes us not want to highlight our miniatures. How many miniatures have you seen or armies have you played with Or maybe this is you yourself that I'm describing, where they'll take out their models, put them on the table, and you'll see that they're all very dark and muddy looking. They got through the base coats, and then they got through the shading, and then they stopped. Don't be that person. And if you are, then let me help you to ascend and get past that. All you have to do is start highlighting, and don't worry about messing up the shadows. All right, so I'm continuing to work my way up, and even though I'm still focusing on the larger areas, I'm starting to see where the light hits the model, or where I want the light to hit the model, where in my mind I want to paint the light hitting the model. And it's usually going to be where the hair bends and curves the most. So that's where I'm going to be adding a little bit more paint. And as you can see, I'm getting over my fear of messing up where the shadows are and where the shade has sunken in, because at this point I realize that I'm also going to be doing an application of Berserker Bloodshade later to tie the colors in and create some more shadows. So I'm not going to go back to Agrax Earthshade. When I finish up with my highlights, I'm going to go on with another color that is going to add some depth to the reds. All right, I'm going to add a little more Miston Red to the top there. The rest, I'm adding Miston Red, really focusing on where the hair bends the most, because that's where I'm going to be building up those highlights, like I said. And then I want to add a lot of it right at the top, because that's where the hair is coming out of the little hair tie thing there. So it's going to be catching a lot of light because it's turning a lot right in that little area, and it's a focal point right near the face. All right, next I'm going to be going up with Evil Sun's Scarlet. Now, Evil Sun Scarlet, Daka Red, the orky named reds are less orange and yellowish in tone. They build up the red color, make the reds brighter without going into the orange side of the color wheel. So this is going to be good for me because I want to differentiate her orange, or her red hair rather, from the red of the orc. I want her to have a little bit more of a pure red coloring. So her hair, I'm really building up right where the light hits the model. I'm trying to focus on those strands of hair and not worrying too much about getting it anywhere else. So my paint strokes are going to be shorter. I'm going to be painting within the lines of that Miston Red. And if you want to just go off on your own and blaze a whole new area, if you're looking at your model and you think, oh, maybe I should have painted Miston Red here a little bit more, don't worry. This is where we're adding that brighter highlight color. You can just add it right now straight. And it's going to go up from that shaded Agrax Earthshade on Miston Red, and it's going to build a beautiful little color for you to keep building up those orange tones. All right, you want your brush to be at a nice point. If you're going to go with some long strokes, like you can see right there, I went with a very big highlight stretch. Then you want to make sure your brush can handle it and your brush can go where you want it to go. So you keep that dark brown in the recesses as much as you can. You want to look at an equal distribution of the shadows as well as the highlights. Okay, working here at the top, I'm going to really focus on this bend of the hair as if the light is hitting this area in the greatest amount so that it's really focusing and bringing up the highlights there. Now you can not only use the tip of your brush, but if you've got some of that paint on your brush, you can just slap it on with the side of your brush as well. We're really adding the highlights. We're not getting too careful yet. So you can see I'm slapping it on in a perpendicular motion right there. We're not getting too careful with the highlights. We're just getting the paint color down on top of that Miston Red. And now I realized I didn't paint any of the hair on her head with Miston Red. So I'm going to come in with the highlight color here. And I'm going to take that Evil Sun Scarlet just right across. It really helps if you only have enough paint to do right on the tip of your brush, because then you can really guide where it's going and you're not worrying about it being on the flat of your brush and then getting everywhere. All right, we can really see at this point where we're going, and we're going to take our Fire Dragon Bright and we're going to top off these highlights. Now, when you're working with Fire Dragon Bright, it's already a very orangey tone, so we're looking at really just not using too much on our brush, wiping off most of it so that we're only using just right at the very tip of our brush, and then picking out individual strands of hair, if we can, as much as possible. It's not going to be foolproof, and you can see I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to get too much of it on in one area. It's going to be too thick. I'm going to have to tone it down with that Berserker Blood shade in just a second. But while I've got it on my brush, I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep going. And remember, highlighting is just a series of smaller and smaller paint strokes. So whereas the Miston Red, I tried to paint as much of it as I could without getting too much into the shadows, building up on that with that Evil Sun Scarlet. At this point, I'm just really laying down very small and subtle strokes to indicate right there the curve of the hair. And this is going to build up beautifully when you're also working on putting down that final shade to tie everything together. It's not going to be so bright, so obvious. If you do want your shades or your hair and your highlights and your shades to be a little bit more obvious, a little bit more vibrant, you want to keep this look going, then add some yellow paints, like some Flash Gets Yellow. Go even smaller than that Fire Dragon Bright and get even bigger with the highlights. Then when you have to tie it down with your Berserker Blood shade, it's gonna look even nicer. But for me right now, I'm just gonna go with 2 highlights. The first highlight to bring out the color, the second, this one here, Fire Dragon Bright, to really make the color pop. And that's the effect that I'm gonna go with for my Supreme Gladiatress here. But like I said, the sky's the limit. You can highlight all the way up to white if you want. I would just go with like a Flash Gets Yellow, go brighter and brighter with the yellow, add more Corax white into that, and by the end of it, you're just gonna have some crazy neon colored hair. I, however, want to keep her hair in the red family of color, so I'm not gonna go too crazy with the highlights. So here we go, Berserker Blood shade. This is the final step, and this is really just a wrapper, so I'm gonna wrap up the video here. Thanks guys for watching. The Berserker Blood shade is pretty thick, so you wanna spread it out as much as possible. The reason I went with Agrax Earth shade first was because putting it over a flat Miston Red allowed me to really pick out where those shadows were, because it's so dark. Berserker Blood shade is more of a dark reddish brown, whereas Agrax Earth shade is more of a dark brown. And so this is going to be really good to tie those bright Fire Dragon Bright yellows and oranges into the reds. It's going to be great to add that red tone to unify the colors, but you don't need it when you're first adding your first shade. I would go with the Agrax Earth shade first. Okay, if you want to follow along my work, we're steaming on through the month of August. We're getting into the end of the summer painting challenge. I'm going to see how much I can get done off of my original 4 projects by the end of the month. And I'm really excited to have you guys there. So check it out, follow us along on the Discord, and join the project yourself, or get back to it if you've taken a break. And I hope your summer is going well. I hope the months are not getting too hot for you, and I hope all of your projects are coming along. I'm going to be doing a lot more videos on all of my other projects, as well as the Heroes of Hobbyton side project that I've got. There's just a lot that's going on in my studio. I'm trying to get as much done as possible, so when I really launch my eBay store, I'm going to have a lot of Warboss Tay exclusive miniatures for sale that you can buy and add to your collection. All right, thank you so much for watching, everybody, and I'm gonna see you in the next video. Latest, players!